Hey YouTube, this is Prime HGSS. Welcome back to the channel. Today I have this tier list here. This tier list was created by the Shuffle Squad, so shout out to them. Um, I am going to go over my thoughts on where these decks rank in the Shrouded Fable format. I'm very excited for Shrouded Fable. I think, although it's a small set, it opens up the door for some creative ideas and maybe even enhance some of the current decks that we have now. Um, Overall, I think not a ton changes, but like I said, I think it gives us the tools to maybe revisit some old things or just kind of get creative. Seen a lot of really cool lists. So like I said, once we get that set next month, really excited to start making content on that. But for now, I'm going to go over these decks, give you my thoughts on them and where they rank. To get them out of the way, when it comes to Arceus decks, I think for the most part, they could be a solid tier 2. My problem with Arceus right now is it kind of just doesn't do enough damage. And they can be awkward to streamline just because of the 3 energy cost. I think right now, possibly, the Charcadet version is better. Just because you have options to different attackers that kind of support Arceus and its low damage output. But other than that, Arceus has been felt very underwhelming for a long time now. So tier 2 at best, just because that V-Star ability is just way too good. Next, we got Banette. Banette's a tier 3 for me. It can be annoying. The lock can be annoying, but 30 damage just isn't enough. It doesn't do enough fast enough. And the second your opponent can start attacking, they'll usually just kind of run you over. Blissey. So Blissey, I want to put Blissey in a tier 2.5 only because it is very good against Dragapult. And in this format, we're expected to see a lot of Regidrago V-Star, which most Regidrago V-Star lists are playing Giratina V-Star as their heavy hitter instead of Raging Bolt. I was very high on Blissey going into the NAIC format, but then Raging Bolt got very popular and Dragapult wasn't as popular as expected, so that changed my view on the deck. But now that we're seeing the rise in Regidrago, and Regidrago mainly is attacking with Phantom Dive, I think Blissey's solid, but I think it kind of falls to the same pitfalls as Arceus, where it doesn't really do a lot of damage. And if you hit like Raging Bolt, I think still is popular enough to the point where it's going to keep this deck down. Miraidon's tier 1.5 for me. It is a deck that can kind of just blow games out of the water with a fast Iron Hands, and because of that, I've been playing this deck actually a lot on ladder, and turn 1 Iron Hands, a lot of times people just can't answer it. The only thing is that Charizard really keeps it in check, because if Charizard sets up, it does tend to kind of just mow you over. Dragapult, I think straight Dragapult variants are tier 2. I think Dragapult as it stands itself doesn't really do a lot. This could change depending on how lists are built going forward. Like maybe the Dusknoir and Dusclops line adds what this deck has been missing. But for now, I think Dragapult's better relegated as a support attacker, like with Charizard or, through Regidrago, just because of how fast Regidrago can use Phantom Dive. Esperanza, tier 3. Cute, funny deck. Can capitalize on a lot of Charizard. But other than that, it kind of doesn't do a lot. Gardevoir. For Shrouded Fable, and I could be completely wrong about this, I don't think Gardevoir is amazing. I think like I said, I can be completely wrong about this, but I'm putting it in tier 2 because the Dusknoir and Dusclops line come out, which can wreak havoc on this deck. Charizard has the ability to take 4 prizes against Gardevoir, and because of that, I think that Gardevoir is just not in a very good place. And like I said, I can be proven completely wrong, but if not, that's where I'm putting it right now. Because at the end of the day, Gardevoir is still just an insanely strong deck. Just now, I don't think now is a great time for it. I mean, I'll definitely put it at the head of tier 2, above Arceus decks. I like it better than Arceus decks, but yeah, I think for right now, to me, tier 2. It's probably going to be an unpopular opinion. Greninja. So, Greninja's always been kind of interesting. The only problem is Gardevoir's prevalence. That's one. And two, Manaphy is in a lot of stuff. So the second attack, you usually don't get great value. You don't really get to use. Shinobi Blade, for 1 energy, does 170 damage. You search your deck for any card, which is very good. The only downside is you can search for that card and then they Iona you, and you did 170 damage. That's all you did. But I've seen some really cool lists coming out with the Dusknoir line, and I think now could be a good time for the deck, because theoretically, if you play, I don't see this in the list, this is kind of something I thought of, a Radiant Blastoise in Greninja, and then you can ping a Manaphy for 20 with Radiant Blastoise, knock out a Dusclops and KO the Manaphy, and then use Greninja's second attack to snipe. So I think now that before I think Greninja was like, probably don't play it. It's cool. It can be fun, but it just doesn't stack up very well. But now I think it can easily be a tier 2 deck. I think it has the ability to deal with Manaphy. I think kind of helps this deck a lot. Quad Thorns, right there with Blissey, tier 2.5. This deck can catch people off guard, but it's got a very low damage output, and it's another one of those decks that if they set up, they'll kind of just mow you over. I put it above Banette just because it's a basic. All you have to do is start it, and it can end the game. Just by starting it, you can end the game right there, then and there. But if you don't, you're fighting an uphill battle. On top of that, I think you're going to see a rise in Canceling Cologne, just because of the new Kyurem card, which decks might want to be able to Canceling Cologne Manaphy before they use that Kyurem's attack. So I think we might see more Canceling Cologne. The deck's got a low damage output, but again, it can just kind of catch someone off guard, and locking them out of their abilities could be enough to end the game. So that's why I put this in the tier 2.5 right now. Kingdra, this is a super interesting card, but I have done no testing with it. Theoretically, it can do some really cool things, but being a stage 2, it's weak to lightning. Miraidon's really popular. Iron Hands is very popular, especially if you're playing as future hands. It has the ability to take 3 prizes on Kingdra EX. So until I see more with this, it's got a very cool first attack, but that's about it. So right now, tier 3, that could change. I want to experiment with it, at least when it comes out. Lost Zone Dragapult, I think, is tier 2.5 at best. I think it is the worst of the Dragapult variants. Zard Pult, Pult Pidgeot, those I think are just have proven to be better. But at the end of the day, like, the Lost Zone engine is still very strong. Dragapult is still a strong enough attacker. Sableye being able to clean up knockouts from the damage spread by Phantom Dive. So to me, 2.5 I think is more than fair right now. Lost Tina. This deck, I think it could easily be tier 2 right now. I mean, Lost Impact is a great number. You can knock out Pidgeots. Regidrago V-Star is very popular. Lugia V-Star is very popular. So it one-shots those, plus the V-Star is just an auto knockout on all these big stage 2 EXs. Again, also the Lost Zone engine. I think maybe it needs to be explored a little bit more. Maybe that could change. Maybe the Dusclops. You can play Dusclops and Dusknoir in it. I have no idea. But on paper, I think it's a solid tier 2 right now. Ancient Box, I'm putting this down in tier 2.5. One prize decks are inherently strong. It hits a good weakness against Gardevoir. The Fluttermane, you can lock decks out of the game for a little bit, but it takes some time to get that damage ramped up, and it can also be very hard to streamline Roaring Moon attackers. So a tier 2.5, I think that's perfect for this deck. Um, I'm guessing this is just like quad Ogre Pawn. When I'm looking down the list, I don't see a Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn list. So maybe it's Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn. If we're saying this is Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn, tier 2. It can blow you out of the game, or it can... But it's a very straightforward and simple deck that can blow your opponent out of the game, but it's just not like performing. And so because of that, I know I'm heavy on the tier 2 right now. I think there might only be one tier 1 or tier 1 to tier 0 deck. These guys, I have not done any testing, but on paper I think these guys are going to be surprisingly good. The Okie Dokie hits like a tank. These decks that are just big basic attack fast have kind of proven to be kind of good, but they also could be, they're glass cannons. That being said, I think tier 2.5 right now, just because I think there's better dark variants. Like, I think just Turbo Roaring Moon is probably the better deck just because of the option of Frenzied Gouging. But it's probably a straightforward deck. Regidrago. Regidrago is going to be tier 1. I think Regidrago is going to be very good. It gains that Kyurem as its attacker. It gains Haxorus, which I don't know how great the Haxorus is going to be. If you play Temples and you get around Mist Energy and you can knock out Lugias really easily. But I've also seen other really cool builds of this deck. I think Regidrago is kind of going to push into the tier 1 for the Shrouded Fable format. Sablezard, to me, is a tier 1.5. Lost Zone decks are going to be strong in general, but Charizard is such a strong attacker that I think at worst Lost Zone, aside from Dragapult, at worst Lost Zone is a tier 2. I think Sablezard though is one of the better variants. Turbo Hands, to me, it's a tier 2.5 deck. Very linear, very easy to get around. You can't get Iron Hands attacking as consistently as Miraidon can, and that's why I put it so much lower than Miraidon. You don't really have any one-shot options either, which hurts the deck a lot. So, like, the longer the game goes on, the more your opponent sets up, the less the deck is doing. Snorlax, Pidgeot, 1.5. Like, I think this is just Pidgeot or Snorlax. They're kind of bundling them together. Either it's Block-Lax or Pidgeot control. Control variants are obviously very strong. A lot of people aren't prepared for them. But once you hit those more experienced players that do know how to play against them, the only thing is they do have cards that you kind of just can't play around because of like the Flute and Erica, stuff like that. Gonna always be a strong deck, but I don't think it's ever gonna overtake the format. Zardpult 1.5. I played this deck a lot, and I think this deck is very strong. I think this deck it's also, to me, it's a ton of fun to play. Just setting up the Charizard, Dragapult, and Pidgeot, 3-stage shoes in a deck. It's like piecing a puzzle together that I haven't experienced in this game in a long time. So I really like that. But other than that, Charizard's a phenomenal attacker. Zolt is an amazing backup attacker. I think this is easily the best way to play Dragapult. So I'm putting that right here in the 1.5. The Lost Zone Raging Bolt, this is a tier 3. Probably don't even play. It's kind of like the predecessor to, not predecessor, a successor to Amazing Rare Rayquaza Lost Zone box. But yeah. I think same with Goodra. Lost Zone Goodra isn't placed very well. Regidrago abuses Goodra's attack way better in my opinion. And it's also not really that hard to get around Rolling Iron because you have Prime Catcher Boss, Iron Bundle Boss. Like you can reset it. Especially Iron Bundle is a very popular card, so it's a lot easier to reset that damage reduction before knocking it out. And then 280 is just a generally easier number to hit. I'm guessing this is Turbo Roaring Moon, which I think Turbo Roaring Moon's pretty strong. I do think though it can flounder if it kind of doesn't pop off. Um, and you can get put into awkward positions with frenzied gouging, doing the 200 damage to yourself. I think solid tier 2, solid straightforward deck. Can be really aggro. Can also surprisingly set up checkmate scenarios where like you have 2 Roaring Moons set up and you're gonna back-to-back frenzied gouging and OHKO anything, and they're kind of like, well, I can't deal with that. I don't know why Turbo Hands is on here twice. I already went over that. Lugia 1.5. Lugia is a deck that once it sets up, it can be very powerful. The use of Iron Hands, the consistent use of Iron Hands is very strong, but it has horrendous consistency issues. If it didn't have those consistency issues, the deck could be a tier 1, but tier 1.5, that's where I think it sits right now. I do personally think that currently Lugia is the worst that the deck has ever been. But that being said, it's stacked up against some like when it came out, it was insane. The Silver Tempest format, Lugia was regarded as probably the best deck of all time, and it was. So it's no surprise that this V Star has stayed very strong. Chen Pao, tier 1.5. Another deck that I think it's pretty good right now just because what we'll talk about, the ability to take knockouts and use take one shots, use Greninja. Yeah, I think Chen Pao stays really strong. It was very underestimated going into NAIC. Not sure much really changes with that. It does gain Pheasantipity, which I mean a lot of these decks do. The Pheasantipity EX is a great card if you don't know what it does. Once in your turn, if one of your Pokemon was knocked out on your opponent's last turn, draw 3 cards. Or one of your Pokemon was knocked out by your opponent on their last turn, draw 3 cards. Lost Zone Box, tier 1. Just one NAIC. This deck has always proven itself to be very, very good. And I think it stays very good. It is what it is. The rise in Dragon Ball could cause it to falter. Not Dragon Ball, Regidrago could cause it to falter. But I can't see writing this deck off almost ever. And then I think the tier 1 of tier 1 in the Shrouded Fable format is Charizard. It gains the Dusknoir line that lets you manipulate the tools that already made the deck really strong. Just being able to artificially inflate Charizard's damage output by knocking out your own Dusclops, giving you access to Defiance Band or Counter Catcher when you shouldn't have before. Just it makes the deck phenomenal in my opinion. I'm very excited. I've always been a big Charizard fan, but I think Shrouded Fable is like gonna be. We've seen Charizard, but now we're really gonna see Charizard. And I could be wrong. Like I said, this is all just my opinion. There are some other decks I'm really excited to try that weren't on this list. So maybe when we get a different list, or I will definitely be putting out videos for decks and things I've thought of and I really want to try out. But other than that, in accordance to this tier list, this is where I sit on everything. Feel free to comment down below. Let me know what you think. But yeah. Like I said, once Shrouded Fable comes out, I'm gonna be trying to put out as much content as I can because I'm actually very excited for some new cards. Right now, it kind of just feels like everything's been talked about, everything in the current format, and yeah. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. Comment down below. This is Prime HSS. I'll see you guys later.